In Japan, the startup culture is really rebounding right now. And it's still very small, and most of the companies kind of know each other. So there's a lot of opportunity. One of the big trends now in robotics is not to actually sell your robot, but to lease it.
Mm.
So at the end of the lease, then at that point, they get a brand new robot for the same price. And then they also have included maintenance and warranty with each monthly fee, rather you buy it one time. So in this new business model, it really allows a lot more people to be able to use robots by kind of supplementing the price and putting it near towards what a general labor unit price would cost. But Japanese kind of use those security guards not really to provide safety, more for deterrence and more for the aspect of feeling safe. But there's a large shortage. So for every 6 applications open, only one gets filled for security guards in Japan. Probably see humanoids type of robots, Yugo robots, other type of humanoid robots. Probably in everyday scenarios or even maybe in some homes in the next 5 to 10 years.
Adrian, thanks you so much for being here with us today. Please tell us more about yourself
Yeah.
before we get into Ugo Robotics.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. Yeah, so H is silent. I'm a French American. I grew up in the States. I have my background actually all in engineering, computer engineering, and then I did my master's in robotics. I did a year in France and then a year in Japan. So that's actually what brought me over to Japan is I finished my master's degree here. Now I work at Yugo. It's a Tokyo-based robotics startup company, which I'll talk a little bit about more later. At Yugo right now, I started as the robotics engineer, and then I moved into a new role as the global partnership manager. Basically, as we're starting to expand overseas, we need someone to oversee all the operations and develop the business. So I stepped into that role.
I really always like to ask people what got you into robotics? Like, what was the interest that triggered you?
Originally, it was my final project in my bachelor's degree. So at my school, they had 2 tracks. They had the normal one, just do a semester-long project, or you can do a year-long project with a company. So it's basically an internship. You take something from ideation all the way to prototype phase within a year, working for a company, having weekly meetings, reviews, etc. So that project, we actually worked with Ghost Robotics and Florida Power and Light. So they wanted us to develop an autonomous docking station for the Ghost Robotics quadruped outside. And since I was already studying computer engineering at the time, I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do in terms of career or master's degree. So after that project, I was just so in love with robotics. I thought, oh, these are the coolest things ever. It's definitely going to be the next huge revolution in the world. So I have to be in on that revolution. So I decided to get into
Mm.
robotics to kind of be on top of the next trend.
Is there like something specific that you fell in love with?
They're just fun. They're super, super fun, and they have a lot of capabilities. But in terms of why I saw them kind of being one of the next trend is one of the main things is safety, increased safety for people. In that use case, they wanted to use the robots in order to kind of go to the substations during after hurricanes or major weather events to kind of check in to see if there's fires or flooding, etc. So that way, an operator doesn't actually have to go. So imagine an operator going to a substation with power lines down. It's very dangerous. So if you send a robot, it's safer. But that situation can be transformed into a lot of different industries as well. So robots are very good at increasing the safety for people in dangerous situations. And I don't think that will stop anytime soon.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of dangerous jobs that can be replaced.
Yes.
You know. So why Japan? Like, I mean, you did an internship here, and
I finished my master's
you
degree.
finished your master
Yeah.
here. And why did you decide to stay? Like, any reason that you were like, okay, this is actually a really good country for me?
Yeah. So I think a few reasons. The first is I think personality wise, my personality is kind of a good mesh with Japanese culture and the personality of Japanese people. And also, all the expats who stay in Japan kind of have similar mindsets as well. So you're already in a community where people think the same as you and have similar interests. So it's very easy to stay. On the other hand, my dad always yells at me why didn't you come to the US and make more money? But in my idea that in Japan, the startup culture is really rebounding right now. And it's still very small, and most of the companies kind of know each other, or at least know one person in one of the other startup companies. So there's a lot of opportunity in Japan if you start a business here and you want to grow it globally, and especially because most of the other technological global powerhouses are in Asia. It's going to be China, Taiwan, Singapore, generally. So it's a lot easier to kind of explore those markets and grow your business if you're already in that vicinity. Rather, if you're only in the US, you're only going to have a client base in the US, probably for the majority of the lifespan of the company, except if you're one of those large exceptions.
Mm. What makes you bullish about Japan? Like, which particular points that you feel like, okay, the startup ecosystem is going into the right
Yeah.
direction?
So most people know Japan as the home of robotics, kind of where robots started. And then there was a bit of a slump, and now it's kind of being rejuvenated. So you can just see how passionate all these startups are now. I think in the last, since like the 1980s or 90s, for like 10, 15, 20 years, they kind of died down. They still a bit more Japanese, traditional conservative type of companies. But now all of these companies are trying to be a bit more Western thinking,
Mm.
Western style. Even now, a lot of the startup companies, majority of the people working there are foreigners from Europe or from the US, from different regions of Asia. So they understand to be able to grow the company, they have to bring in foreign talent and they have to diversify because if they're only going to be Japanese um, and develop a product for Japan, you're not going to leave Japan and your sales are always going to be confined to Japan. Rather, if you now have a diverse team and you understand you need to grow and expand outside of Japan, there's a lot of doors that open for you when you change that thinking, that
Mm.
mindset. Rather, traditional companies don't think like that. The startup scene in Europe is kind of still confined to Europe. Um, and then the US is still confined to the US, even though it's a larger market.
Mm.
Um, but all the market, let's say in those in the US, for instance, the market conditions are going to be the same throughout each state or each region of the US. If you're in Japan going to other countries, each country is a bit different. So you really can get a good feeling of how does my product solve an issue in each country because each country has their own issues. So you really get to hone in and create a very valuable product for a lot of different types of people.
That's interesting. Based on what you said, one thing that I observe is that often the development team
Yeah.
are foreigners,
Yep.
but I guess the commercial, the business team is Japanese,
Yes. In general.
right? So does that not still keep you in the same issue then, where business is mostly done in Japan and it's actually hard, even though you have a foreigner,
Yeah.
development team, you still have an issue to go to overseas.
I think even though that a lot of for startup companies, the business people are still going to be Japanese. Um, the companies are still trying to move overseas. So, for instance, maybe the internal language is English,
Mm.
or there's the lower level required for Japanese, for instance. But they understand that sales still needs to go over and across. So, one of the other reasons that they hire foreign talent is if they want to go global, they need technical support, and they can only provide that generally in English. Right now, is the main language used overseas. So if they only have a Japanese tech team, it's kind of hard to provide that as well. But a lot of the people that I work with, because we joined some programs for Japanese companies moving overseas, and most of the Japanese people in those companies speak English. So for them, it's not an issue as well.
Mm.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe a weird question, but beside also the monetary aspect, what are the benefits of expanding overseas? Because I feel like the Japanese market is still not that mature. Like there's still so much opportunity to grow in Japan. Like what are the benefits to expand overseas?
Yeah. I think it really depends on the first, I guess, is money.
Mm.
Um, Apart from that is how much do you believe in your product that it can solve issues around the world? Um, If you're developing robotics or renewable tech, for instance, you don't want to keep that to yourself. You want to spread it out to the world because it can really change a lot of lives and a lot of businesses and a lot of different aspects of different types of communities. So even if you keep in Japan, it's a bit difficult at that point to grow. Like robotics, it's basically a hardware style business, so it's all about how much can you sell. And for certain types of robotics, like service robotics, there's a limit to each country of how many units you can sell. So at that point, then you have to go overseas and kind of increase. So you can change that by changing the business model. So one of the big trends now in robotics is not to actually sell your robot, but to lease it.
Mm.
So at the end of the lease, then at that point, they get a brand new robot for the same price. And then they also have included maintenance and warranty with each monthly fee. Rather, you buy it one time, maybe you use it for 2 or 3 years, and then you have to buy a brand new robot for the high initial price again with the new features. So in this new business model, it really allows a lot more people to be able to use robots by kind of supplementing the price and putting it near towards what a general labor unit price would cost.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Beside, I guess, for that business model, beside the, I guess, predictable and stable revenue,
Yeah.
what other benefits do you have from doing that? Because seems like very intense as well in terms of replacing robots,
It
like,
is. So it depends how long the lease. So the first part is our at Yugo, our lease generally lasts about 3 years, and they pay on a monthly basis, plus other additional options. So we offer basically a base model of our robot. And let me maybe explain what our robots do first.
yeah.
So, Yugo, we make robots for business, digital transformation, generally for operations. So, we do a few different industries at the moment. The main solution that we target is security. So, the security industry in Japan has a huge labor shortage. For each 6 applications that are
Can
open,
you just define security in that sense? Because Japan is
yeah,
such a safe country, like,
yeah,
and I
yeah,
remember last time I met you, I asked you the same thing. Because
yeah.
define security in that sense.
So, in security, in this sense, it would be monitoring and surveillance. So, even though Japan is one of the safest places in the world, whenever you go to a building, you always see a security guard,
Mm.
right? Wearing the hat and the nice suit. But Japanese kind of use those security guards not really to provide safety, more for deterrence and more for the aspect of feeling safe. By you can see someone, if you see a security guard, generally you'll feel a bit safer. But there's a large shortage. So for every 6 applications open, only one gets filled for security guards in Japan.
Wow.
But they still need them because even though it's safe, you still have to provide some security. So our robots are helping with that labor shortage. So they'll go around the buildings, do patrols. We have security AI that we can use to detect different behaviors, like if someone's trespassing, if they fell down, fighting, smoking, etc. So from there, if it detects an event, it will send an alert to our software, which generally an operator will have to be operating, which is also a nice aspect of using our platform because it doesn't take away jobs because someone actually has to be on the other side of the robot generally, especially in the security industry. Because if you see an alert saying there's trespassing, the security guard can then determine if it's safer to send the robot first or to go himself or
So
herself.
it really works as an extension to the
Yes.
security guard.
Yes. The other industries that we're in are inspection. So inspection would be targeting visual types of inspections for industrial locations like data centers, power plants, or factories, where a lot of the things are still kind of analog, or they have to do daily or weekly inspections. So a daily, weekly inspection around a factory floor could take a few hours, and each time an employee comes, you have to retrain them. So it's a very technical job. But if you use a robot, you only have to program them one time, and they can do that job more efficiently. They might not have some bias, for instance. So some places might want to detect odors, and that can be very biased, but depending on your nose. And unless you have a good nose, you wouldn't notice some strange odors in the facility. But if you use a robot, it only tells you what it actually finds in the data. So in those cases, we're helping to increase the productivity and efficiency and kind of create better standardization of quality coming out of these industrial locations. And then the third main solution that we just recently released is our guidance solution. So this one is more probably tuned to what normal people would think about when you think about robotics now in the news. So you have the kind of humanoid robots answering questions and kind of doing tasks for people. But that's still very advanced stages. So what we're doing and what people are willing to kind of use now in their companies, especially in the front end, is kind of concierge or
Mm.
guidance robot. So when people come into the facility, they can ask them questions. The robot can guide them to a certain location in the store or the company, give them a tour around the building, etc. Um, and because we're using LLMs and Gen AI in order for the robot to detect speech patterns and respond, we can also do it in multiple languages. So we can do Japanese, Chinese, Korean, English, French. So you can imagine if you put one of our robots in, let's say, a train station,
Yeah.
a busy train station where a lot of tourists are coming in from different countries, and every tourist has problems with the train eventually. So imagine instead of going to the train operator who only speaks Japanese, now you can go speak to the robot who has the same information as the train operator, and you get it quicker and you can understand because it's speaking your own language.
Yeah. I can see that being very
Yeah.
useful. I have two I have two follow-up
Yep.
questions. Like the one is about the robots doing inspection, like for
Hmm.
security. Yeah, do you guys have data to see like, improvements, for example, in factory inspection, like using those kind of solutions? Like what kind of improvements do you see overall by using the robot instead of, an engineer doing the inspection?
Yeah, it's a good question. So most of the data that we have is only from when our clients actually give us back the reports of how it's being used. But in general, for the inspection solution, we find that the time that they save is anywhere from 50 to 80% of what an inspector would be doing. Um, what makes it so high is a few things. The first is the robot is replacing all of the manual repetitive work. So, in the case of a data center, for instance, which is a large use case for us, it's going to each piece of equipment, maybe taking a picture with the thermal camera, looking at the sensor, recording the piece of data, going around to each room, um, doing for each server or each piece of power equipment. At the end, you have to go back to your office, log everything into a report, make all the graphs and charts. At the end, send it to everybody, right? But with our robot, it does all of that. So it'll go take all the pictures automatically using maps and navigation. We have IoT to connect with IoT sensors. If not, we also have meter reading AI. So if they have meters that they don't have already connected in some type of mesh network, we'll take a picture of them, read it, and then send it to our platform. And then at the end, the platform takes all the images, all the data sources that it's already recorded from that task. Let's say the task is that one room, and then it's saved in the cloud. So our solution is cloud based. So as soon as the task is finished, it sends all the data, puts it into one report, which then you can go back later. You can view all the sensors over time, see how they change over time, and then it actually sends the reports to everyone who needs it. So you're
Mm.
saving a lot of time. So in one case, it was like one 95-minute route. Took the robot about 45 minutes to do the same exact thing that the person was doing.
Yeah, and the beauty is that person's now doing other work, right?
Exactly.
It's just
So
like,
they're saving work. So you're not really replacing humans because
yeah,
that's a big question we always get.
yeah.
Are robots going to replace human labor? What are
Mm.
humans going to do? But I think they're really going to just supplement humans, in my opinion. So in that case, um, when you have, let's say, an inspector who worked there a long time, and like you mentioned before, maybe over time they become complacent or maybe they forget something, but with the robot, they don't. So the robot will gather all the information, and then afterwards, the inspector can actually just focus on, is this information correct? Is there some abnormalities there? Should I go again and check in person this one data point to make sure it's correct? So they actually get to use their higher technical skills rather than just walking around and kind of doing a bit more manual labor, which can get exhausting.
Yeah.
for some people. In the security, for instance, most of the security guards in Japan are going to be a bit older in age. So for them, it's going to be difficult to walk around the facilities all day, 24 hours a day. So if you're using a robot to supplement that, they can watch the live stream. So each robot you can actually speak through. So we have speakers and microphones in each robot. So you can use your own voice or you can use the voice of the robot if you want to speak to someone on the other side that's actually next to the robot. Um,
Interesting.
Other than being fully automated, you can also do full remote control. And with our main robot, you go Pro. It can actually go up and down the elevator by pressing the buttons like a person can do. So the security guard at that point can just sit at his desk, relax, check people in, do all of his own reports or separate work if needed. And the robot can actually just go around the facility and check on people. And since Japan is generally safe, it just saves them a lot of time and maybe pain later on from
Mm.
doing all the walking and physical work. Rather, now they can focus on doing all the technical work and actually things that um, that they can do that robots can't do.
Yeah, it feels way more efficient, even as a security guard, to be able to see, okay, I have now a global view of the whole place
Yes.
and I'm fully responsible. It feels so much more, I
Yes.
guess, good as well.
Yes. So one of the big cases that I always bring up for an example is that imagine it's at night, and our robot, the security AI, can also you can also put into the IP cameras in each room, so it doesn't even have to be from the robot's camera. So if one of the cameras in the other room sees someone trespassing at night, it'll send an alert to our software. Then the security guard will say, "Oh, it's just the janitor." Or if it's someone, who looks suspicious and you don't know their intentions, it's safer at this point to send the robot there. You can control manually if you want, and then go speak with the person saying, please leave or I'll call the police. Because especially if it's at night and it's dark, you don't know what they're doing. You don't know if they're there to rob the place, if they're there to harm someone. If they're there to harm or to rob and they break the robot, it's just a robot. But if,
Mm.
if they hurt the security guard, then that's a whole other issue, right?
Mm.
And when you have a good police force, like in Japan, if someone comes to rob you and then you arrest them, if they broke the robot, you can make them pay for a new robot. But if they hurt someone, it's a bit different. So
Mm.
that's just one of like the many use cases of increased safety, kind of like what as I mentioned before with the other type of robot that robots can help with businesses.
Interesting. When it comes to the, I guess, the concierge application
Yep.
that we mentioned, how do people feel about? Do people feel happier to interact with a robot at this point or with a human being from your observations?
I think it's very early to tell how it's actually going to be perceived long term over time. Right now, in the space, robots being used for concierge are still very novel. Um, and especially, it depends on how the robot looks, right? So in Japan, they already have some hotels that are completely run by robots, but they look very animatronic. They're trying to look human, but they're a robot. Where our robot, it's a robot, it has some human features like maybe a face and some arms, but in every aspect it's a robot. And at that point, people are always kind of gravitate towards that because I mentioned um, in a few different talks why does our robot look why it looks. So our robot falls into this theory called the uncanny valley, which basically states if a robot looks too much like a human and it's not exactly like a human, it'll be scary. But if it's like completely robot, it's okay. If it's completely robot, but it looks a little bit like a human, it's okay. And then it dips really
Mm.
down. So it depends how close you get to that. Um, so depending on that scale, that's really going to determine, in my opinion, how well robot companies are going to be due for concierge. And since our robot's design falls in that good side of the uncanny valley, I think it'll be fine. So there's never been any place a robot hasn't been, like exhibition, shows, malls. The first time you see it, they always want to stop and take pictures, say hi to the robot because it looks friendly, it looks cute.
Mm.
Um, So in that aspect, I think it'll do very well over time using those type of robots in concierge to either just answer questions or to interact with customers.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I guess even like what's the Optimus from Tesla looks
Yeah,
slightly scary as well, right?
yeah, it's
Like
a bit
it's
scary. There's no
yeah,
eyes. You can
yeah,
tell it's a robot, but there's no features.
yeah, yeah,
Or
yeah.
the other robot, I forget the name, but it mimics a human face.
Yeah, that's scary.
It's a bit, yeah, unsettling.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's why everyone loves R2D2, right? Like
Yes, yes.
it's clearly a robot.
It's
Like
clearly robot. He can talk, so that's his human aspect, right?
yeah,
So things like that kind of help it out.
interesting. What are the current challenges for Yugo Robotics in general? Like for you guys to take it to the next level? Like what are you guys facing right now to expand faster and further?
So I'll start with further. So
Hmm.
going outside of Japan, the main struggle is there's 2 points. First is the market demand for robots because each country has their own needs in terms of why they want to use robots. The second is money. So some countries might want to use robots, but they can't afford. So there's a very fine balance of what features the robot has versus what is the price of the robot. Now, most people, in my opinion, think that most robots in general, the features should be very, very high, like Optimus or all these other very advanced robots, with a low price. But in reality, that can't be the case. Um, Technologically wise, the main thing is keeping up with demand. So now AI, LLMs, ChatGPT, these are the main buzzwords. So if your company doesn't have those buzzwords somewhere in your technology, someone's going to think, "Oh, maybe it's not that advanced, maybe it's not that good." So now you
Mm.
have to keep up with what consumers think is good. One of those things is making sure the robots have speech now is very integral, especially if other features are lacking. Um, Navigation is another big one. So making sure the robot can go somewhere on its own without any human assistance. And then another one I find particularly for security concierge is the elevator aspect. So being able to go up and down the elevator. So in general, there's two ways to do that. The first is what we've done already. So create a robot that can actually push the button to go up and down the elevator by itself. The second is connecting the robot to the elevator system. So calling the elevator over the network and then bringing it to the correct floor. But in that case, that can be a very, very long process and very expensive. Um, I was just speaking with one of our partners in Singapore, and they said one of the cheapest costs just for one elevator to integrate a robot that they saw was about $50,000 to $80,000, and the process can take a few months. So
Because those elevators are like on old technology, or like how come is it so
it's
complicated?
it's because of the process.
Mm.
So each country is different process. But in general, in order to change in Japan to change the elevator, you have to go first to the building company. Now the building company has to contact the elevator company, who then has to agree or disagree to install new equipment to the elevator, and then they go back to the building company, back to you. It's going to be a very long process. In Singapore, it's pretty much the same. You go to the building manager, who goes to the contractor. The contractor can add their own fees or not, who then goes back to the building, who then goes back to you.
There's an entire chain to go.
Yeah, just to change one thing. So those are the main technological things that I think a robot needs to have now in order to work in a business type of setting.
Interesting. You mentioned like often expectations and I guess the offer of the product
Yes.
are misaligned. How do you convince as a salesperson, especially like how do you convince people like, hey, this is solving your problem and your expectations are not aligned with the problem you're trying to solve? Like how do you deal with that?
Yeah. So the first thing is sometimes maybe they don't realize the exact issue that they're having and which features or which products will solve that issue. Because in 100% of the cases, they want 100% of the features
Mm.
for zero cost, right? So you have to find kind of a middle ground.
Why is that though? Like, why do people? Is it just because they want the option? Just because like we might need some kind of like why do people?
Uh, no one wants to pay anything for. Everyone wants free, right? And they want the best quality, the best, most functions out of a robot. But this is also kind of where it gets tricky going into other countries, because each country has their own methods and thinking. Japan loves technology. So in Japan, it's very easy to sell new technology because for them, they'd rather buy something or rent it, see if it works. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. At least they tried. And it also looks good for the company that they're trying. In Singapore, they don't care to try unless they know it's going to solve your problem. Because in Singapore, its main thing is efficiency and ROI. If it's not going to have all the functions that I want, and if not for the price that I want it, I won't even use it for free as a trial for free.
Mm.
Um, and then other countries have different aspects. You kind of have to know the country and kind of the business thinking behind it. Um, but the reason why that most people in general want the most functions for the least amount of money is because they want the highest ROI. They want to see, I want this robot to bring me this much money by paying the least amount of price. So the more functions you have with the lower cost means the more money in the end that you're either saving or you're making for your business. So in order to kind of squash some of their ideal thinking in a way and kind of make it a bit more practical, pragmatic, is you need to kind of sit down with them and kind of find out the exact issues that they're having and see if the functions that are now available or developing functions of Yugo can fit or fix their current issues. If they can't, they can't. So I would love for us to sell our robot to every single company, but it's not possible because not every company needs a robot to fix, and we understand that. Um, it's hard to do everything as a single robot company, make a robot for every type of situation. So sometimes we tell the client, look, I understand your problems. These are our functions. Right now, I don't think it's the best time to use our product in your facilities for a reason A, B, C. Um, we're working on developing new features in the future to help solve these issues. At that point, I'll recontact you because I don't want you to waste your time and money using our product when I think most likely it might not work
Mm.
um, for your current situation.
This might be again a very specific question, but like
Yep.
among the market of those who actually can benefit from your solutions,
hmm
how many are aware of their problems? Because I feel like when you have that kind of solutions, especially it's so cutting edge that most of people are not aware it exists, so they don't really realize they have a problem, right? It's the same with
Yep.
the security guards. Like,
Yep.
how much of the market has to be educated right now?
It's a good question. I think most people now at least know robots can solve problems in general, whether it's for business and factories, logistics. Um, so whenever a company sees a robot that might fix a solution or might create a solution for one of their problems, even if they don't know what the problem is, a lot of times they'll reach out to us saying, hey, we really like your robot. We think the functionality is cool. How can it help my business? So I think in robotics, one of the bigger tendencies is not, oh, it's going to solve this issue. It's how can I use the robot to solve a issue
Mm.
in the company? Of course, there's a lot of companies who know that robots are already existing. Like in Singapore, right now, it's the number one digital country in the world in digital competitiveness. So every company there knows about robots, what they can do, and most of them kind of stay up to date.
Mm.
So in that case, they're actively searching for robots for problems, or they put out a tender saying, "I have this issue, and I need this, and this type of features or requirements." So at that point, if your robot fits, you can apply. If not,
Nice.
you don't apply.
Is there some FOMO happening as well? Because I mean, with the whole, I mean, again, like the Tesla robot, all this stuff,
Yeah.
does it help to actually have people say, "Oh, I just want to fit in a robot in my whole business"? Is there some FOMO happening?
I think in Japan.
Yeah.
I think in Japan. In Singapore, that's not the case. Um, Malaysia, we also are doing business in Malaysia. There, they just want to kind of increase productivity and efficiency. But in Japan, having a robot is really a status type of thing. They understand it'll help the business, but really, if I say, "Oh, my company has this great robot who can do concierge and go around detect different things," it makes the company look better than what they might actually be.
Interesting.
Of course, if they have the resources, they're probably a good company to begin. Um, but that's kind of one of the way to pull in clients in Japan is saying, "Oh, this company is using this type of technology, so they must be very advanced type of company," which probably they are, right? But if you can't buy a robot, it's you don't have the capital, so maybe you're at a lower status compared to like Japanese type of thinking. So
Mm, like, yeah, makes sense. Hugo Robotics is growing very fast, right?
yes,
Like, can you briefly walk us through like the biggest achievement so far? Because last time I met you, you mentioned to me, "Oh, we are only a couple of years old, and
yeah,
that's where we are." And I was like, "That's
yeah.
crazy fast."
So the company started in 2018. We released our first commercial robot in 2021, and that was our security solution. From 2021 to 2023, in the security sector, we now have the largest market share for security robots for commercial use in Japan, over 50% in 3 years. Um, Around that same time, we started developing our new inspection model, Yugo Mini. Um, and just for some numbers for units, from 2021 to now, we've shipped about 300 robots. In the first year, I can't remember the exact numbers. I think it's around 90. And then the year after that, more and more and more. But just in the past 2 months, we've done about 50 robots. So it's growing quite fast.
Mm,
So in order to keep up with demand, we have to do production, move it outside of our own company because up until now we've done all of our own production in house, all the assembly in house. Everything
that's
is done
amazing as
in
well.
house.
Yeah, that's also amazing.
So since it's growing so fast, we definitely need to figure out production, especially for overseas manufacturing as well, because shipping costs can go quite high depending on the amount of units you're shipping overseas. And the second is human resources. So bringing in more engineers, more people to help with the growth of the company.
Mm, yeah, super impressive. I'm sure there are many reasons why you guys are successful, but among the other competitors out there, like what makes your product really stand out when it comes to especially the security aspect, I
Yeah.
guess.
So first, foremost is price. Our price for what we offer for functionality, I think, is one of the best or the best in Japan. Um, Generally, what we do, we offer this base model of robot for less than what it costs labor unit for a person in Japan for a security guard. And then they can add different options on top, so the AIs or different things like that. Second is the ability to use the elevator. So we're one of the only companies who can actually press the button and go up the lift by itself. There's other companies who do it, but we have everything integrated. So that would be the third main reason why I think Yugo succeeds over some other companies is actually our software and our platform. So a lot of other robots in general, you can buy the robot, but then you have to develop all your own use cases. You have to do all your own functionality, integration, system building, etc. But with Yugo, we have Yugo platform, Yugo portal, which basically we do all the integrations for you. And since it's cloud based, you can access the robots anywhere as long as you're connected to the internet. So in general, the customer doesn't have to do any of their own implementation unless they want to, which they can because we make our platform no code. So everything is kind of block based. You can put everything onto a schedule, see all your reports just from our one platform. Rather, other similar competitors, you can only use their robots if you already subscribe to their security service in general,
Mm.
or you have to now create all your own functionality. So I think those are the main three differentiators for Yugo.
Cost, plug and play, like,
Yeah,
and frictionless, basically.
yes, pretty much.
Awesome. And I mean, the fact that you guys do everything in house, once you figure it out, everything becomes easier as well, right?
Yes. So there's very few that we don't do in house. So, for instance, a lot of our AI comes from partners because we understand we can't make everything. So, we want to focus on the robot.
Mm.
Rather, if we don't make our own AI now at this stage, it wouldn't be as good as if we were just to use an AI company who
Mm.
specializes in creating certain models. So we pull from them at this point. Hopefully, as the company grows, we'll develop our own models as we increase how many engineers that we have.
And
So
you collect more data as well on site, which I guess
yes,
that's your data, right? So you are developing the whole
yes,
AI as well. You mentioned like talent. I mean, for every company in general, especially in robotics, like once you have the demands, you have to ramp up the offer. Talent is an issue.
yes.
What are you guys looking for right now?
So right now, I think it always depends on the trends as well. Our robots, the base, the hardware, mechanical, I think is okay. So right now, looking a bit more on the software side. So one other aspect of software is not just creating new functionalities, but as we grow to become a global company, you also have to think about multilingual compatibility and how to integrate that into your softwares. So being able to now go completely from Japanese because since it's cloud based, all the databases are in Japanese. So now you have to translate and then basically create a new software for each language. So people, workers, engineers to help with that, as well as just increase the capabilities. So finally tuning the LLM or GPT functions for speech, maybe doing some image recognition, some more um, pick and place modeling for the arms, things like that.
Mm, software developers, machine
Yes.
learning, LLM, NLP as well, I guess, then,
Yep.
as well. People who
Yes.
can really,
Maybe some robot engineers as well for navigation
yeah,
would be nice. 3D
yeah,
navigation, 3D mapping, things like that.
interesting. Um, I guess they can just reach out to you if they're interested. And I don't think you guys are hiring actively right now, but things might move very fast in the near future, right?
Yes. So we are currently still doing fundraising. We're finishing up our latest round, I believe, at the end of this month. So hopefully, in the next couple months, we can now accept some new applicants and bring on people with the team. Especially as we grow overseas, we need a bit more talent to come in and help out.
Mm, awesome. A bit of a different question here, but like, what are some potential negative aspects you can imagine from this kind of robotic solutions? Do you see any, or
Um, there are always, I think, dangers in general. One is maybe navigation. If what happens if the robot goes in the wrong spot and it falls, that's always an issue. In Japan, though, we have insurance for our robots, so if anything happens, everyone will be, compensated properly. Um, or now with GPT and LLMs, maybe they misinterpret the information and they give the wrong answers, which can happen, right? But when people are using that and one wrong answer, maybe they'll never use or speak to a robot again.
mm,
So everything really has to be perfect. So I think those are kind of some dangers. Is you have to make sure your product is ready, but that can take a long time to make perfect. So you kind of have to figure out what
mm,
can I do to release this without being 100% perfect. But for safety issues like navigation, it has to be 100% before you can release. But for things like speech, or some other, AI models, they can not be as accurate first release as beta as they should be. Kind
mm.
of get the interest, and then after there, for the general release models, make them 100% accurate.
In a world where like robotics gets better and better, the AIs
Yep.
are getting better and better. Can you imagine a moment where we actually prefer to interact with robots instead of humans, and we start losing our human touch. Can you imagine that happening?
Maybe far, far, far in the future. But I think robots in general won't replace most jobs. Mainly,
I'm talking more like
yeah,
just interactions, like
yeah,
no
yeah,
jobs here. Like,
yeah. But like manual repetitive jobs. So you're not going to be interacting maybe on a daily basis. But now everyone's on their phone, right?
mm,
ChatGPT you use to answer any question, maybe instead of going to your boss or your coworker, just ask ChatGPT. And then you check with your coworker. But there are certain industries, um, like police, medical. In my opinion, I would never want to speak with like a robot doctor because I feel more comfortable with the human touch because there's some things that robots can't replicate, like the human touch. So you have to be able to be gentle with your clients, especially if you're a doctor. If you're a police, it comes to kind of the idea is what if the robot accidentally detects this event incorrectly and now harms a human, right? So I think there's specific industries and sectors where robots will probably never be
mm,
officially 100% there. They might be supplementing some things. Um, but I think in general, people like the human touch.
mm,
It's a bit warm. Rather just speaking to a robot, it's convenient.
yeah.
But people, especially if you go to hotels or a lot of these places, you want that homey feeling, the human touch, but you also want convenience. So I think robots and humans will always, I think, in the future work together. I don't
Yeah.
think they'll kind of favor one over the other.
Yeah, I feel like it's really about the mood you're in as well. Like,
Yeah.
if I go to the hotel and I'm on a business trip, I just want to get to my room
Yep.
quickly. I want to talk to a robot. I don't
Yep.
want to talk to a human. But if I'm with my family and I'm
Yep.
relaxed, I want to talk to a human being, right?
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
Can you imagine a world where humans are like literally being friends with robots? Like, because yeah, like that was more the question I want to ask is like, if we get so comfortable interacting with robots, can we get to a point where we say, "Oh, it's Friday night, let's have drinks with the robots"? Like that kind of world. Can you imagine it?
um, I can imagine it. Yeah. I think we're so far from that future, but I can imagine depending on how advanced.
Mm.
But in
Why
that,
do you think we're so far from it?
because I think even like with now AI LLMs, you know you're not talking to a person. If you use a lot of those kiosks with like the AI generated people, the voice sometimes you can even tell
Mm.
um, it's not a person. Sometimes you can't tell, but it's really I think the physical. So if I'm looking at this robot and I know it's a robot, I don't really want to be its friend unless it looks human. But to in order for a robot to look human, it's very difficult. It's
Mm.
very, very thin line where it comes. It's human or it's just very scary, intimidating. So I think it's more about that is why I don't think I'll be having drinks with a normal robot unless it looks like a human and speaks and talks and walks like a human.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. For my perception on this is like, I think there are mostly mental barriers, and like, because
Yeah.
I can see myself really enjoying having conversation with ChatGPT at this point already.
Yeah.
Like, I find it extremely interesting, and sometimes, like, if I had to choose between meeting someone or spending an evening with an AI and talking with an LLM, I might choose the LLM if I really want to orient the conversations towards my
Yeah.
personal interests.
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem that far away from me. But yeah, that's just my perception, I
Yeah.
guess. Let's get into some rapid fire
Yep.
questions.
Let's go for it.
Uh, you've been in Japan for now 2 years and a half, 3 years, roughly
Yeah. About 2.5.
two and a half.
Yep.
What's something that surprised you upon your arrival that you didn't expect?
Um, I did not expect there to be no trash cans anywhere and that I wasn't allowed to eat or drink while walking. Other than that, kind of everything was as expected.
We're not allowed to eat.
You can eat and walk. You can walk while eating and drinking,
Uh,
but some places it's kind of rude, is what
okay.
I've been told. So, just if you go out and you notice that if someone goes to Konbini and buys food, they'll stand outside the Konbini
Yeah.
eating the sandwich. They won't walk with it,
Yeah, I'm doing it. I just
right?
I got I think my wife
Yeah,
kept telling me stop eating in the train and stuff, and eventually that just
yeah,
became normal to me.
yeah,
Yeah.
but by far no trash cans really surprised me.
Yeah, yeah, it's still super annoying.
Yeah.
Um, wildest prediction for the coming 5 to 10 years?
Hmm. I think that we'll probably see humanoids, type of robots, Yugo robots, other type of humanoid robots. Probably in everyday scenarios, or even maybe in some homes, helping cooking or cleaning or doing the laundry. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, I would say that, and then a lot of more autonomous cars for taxi drivers. Maybe not in Japan, but in other countries around the world. I think that's going to be very popular in the next coming years.
Waymo is deploying in Japan right now, right?
They're,
They're
I believe,
testing.
yeah, they're doing some testing,
Yeah, yeah.
but I think Japanese people really love um, having a human driver.
Mm,
I like having a human driver as well, to be honest. It makes me feel more safe when we're driving. Nothing against autonomous vehicles, but it's um, maybe if I want to change the location at the last minute, or I say, oh, can you just drop me off the street on the left?
yeah.
You can do it with an autonomous car. It's going to drop you where it drops you, pick you up where you picked up.
Yeah, there's still some improvements
Yeah,
to
so
be
I
made there.
think it'll increase though,
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
really well in the future.
I saw this video on YouTube of a guy stuck in a Waymo just going around and around on a parking lot, and he couldn't stop
Yeah.
it. He was stuck for 2 hours in
Oh my
this car.
gosh.
It was pretty funny. Um, what's the kindest thing someone has ever done for you,
In Japan or
just in your whole life?
in
Maybe.
my whole life, um, hmm, I don't know my whole life, but the one that comes to mind is when I first came to Japan. I stayed in an Airbnb for a week with this Japanese family, so I kind of consider them my host family, in a way. And they were just so kind. They knew I didn't speak any Japanese at the time. They didn't really speak English, but they gave me maps of the area that they've had for years. They said, "Oh, take this map. These are all the good restaurants, all the good shops you should go to. Let me drive you around, kind of like take you around the area to kind of show you so you know where you're going next time." So they kind of really helped me kind of settle into Japan when they didn't need to, because I
Mm.
was technically paying them
It was an
to stay
Airbnb,
in their
yeah.
house, right? So that's something I think I'll always remember. Yeah.
Just free kindness,
Free
like.
kindness. I didn't even, yeah, ask. They said, "Oh, do you want this map? Do you want this? I have these coupons. Like, you want me to drive you around, show you the area?" I said, "That would be great. Thank you so much." Yeah. So even to this day, every couple months, I go over to their house for dinner or for lunch. I bring them a gift. I'm actually going over there this Saturday to see them again. So
Love it.
yeah, one small act of kindness can really go a long way.
Completely
Yep.
agree. What's the best advice you have ever received?
The best advice. This is hard. Um, it's kind of maybe corny, but yeah, just kind of follow your dreams. But it's a bit more than that. So my grandpa told me when I was young, you should always follow your dreams, but you should make sure that your dream is achievable. So whenever you have a dream, you should go and make a list of what exactly does this dream mean? How do I get to this point? What are all the steps? And what are all the sub steps to go, to achieve that dream? So when you have a dream, you can't just drop everything and run. Of course, you can do it if you want. Um, but if you actually want to make sure that dream comes true, you kind of have to do some planning because things just don't happen. Very rarely they do. So you have to be driven. So have a dream, go for your dream, and work hard and make a plan.
Love it. Love it. Adrian, absolute pleasure, man. It's been fun.
Yep. Thank you so much. Yeah, it
Uh,
was a good time.
thank you so much. Cheers.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Cheers.